Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into a question that honestly might just change how you think about education altogether. Is school really doing its job if it mostly focuses on what to learn, and not so much on how to learn? I've been thinking about this one for a while, and I'm keen to really get into it with you. Maybe think back to your own study days for a second. Endlessly reading a textbook again and again, just kind of hoping it would stick. Sound familiar? Because it definitely does to me.
Oh, absolutely. It's a fantastic question, really. And our mission today for this deep dive is basically to unpack what how to learn actually means. And more importantly, why it's just so vital. When we talk about how to learn, it's not just some vague idea. We mean real practical strategies, things like effective note-taking, powerful memory techniques, active recall, spaced repetition, things like that. Also, managing your time well, and even the skill of staying motivated, which is often overlooked. It's all about the process, you see, the process of getting and holding on to knowledge, not just the facts themselves. It really reminds me of that old saying, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach him how to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime. That idea. It fits perfectly here with learning.
That fish analogy really hits home. Yeah, and it makes me think, gosh, how many of us felt like we were just being handed fish in school? Constantly memorizing things, but never really learning how to, fish for knowledge ourselves. Most education systems, let's face it, are built around delivering content. That's the main thing. Students cram facts for exams, and then, honestly, they forget them pretty quickly afterwards. There's not often much focus on how to study well or, how to make that information stick long term. I definitely remember just reading that textbook over and over and over, hoping my brain would just absorb it somehow.
Like osmosis, yeah. Nobody actually taught me how to revise properly. So as we get started here, maybe just take a second. Think about your own time in school. Did it genuinely teach you how to study? Or was it mostly just about what you needed to study for the next test?
That's a really great point. And when we talk about how to study effectively, we're not just talking theory. There are actual tools, things cognitive science shows are super effective. For example, you mentioned active recall. That's basically just testing yourself, right? Instead of passively reading something again, you actively trying to pull the information out of your own memory. Think flashcards, maybe, or just closing the book and trying to explain a concept out loud, in your own words. Research shows again and again that doing this active retrieval, it boosts long-term memory way more than just rereading, like potentially up to 50% more for complex stuff. Then you've got spaced repetition. That's about reviewing things at intervals that get longer over time, so not cramming it all in at once. This works with how our memory naturally functions, really cementing things long term. And those are just two examples. There are other really powerful techniques too, like mind mapping or active reading strategies. We can touch on those too. They can completely change how you deal with information.
Okay, so teaching these skills sounds fantastic, ideal even. But that brings up a big question, doesn't it? Why does the content still dominate so much in schools? Why is there such a push to cover material, sometimes it feels, at the expense of teaching these really crucial learning skills?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. There's no single answer. Part of it definitely is just practical pressure. Curriculum designers, teachers, they have limited time, and there's huge pressure to get through this vast amount of material, especially with standardized tests hanging over everyone's heads. If the syllabus isn't covered, students might do badly on those tests, and that's a massive worry for schools, for parents, for everyone involved.
Right, I get that. The pressure is real. And sometimes isn't there also this sort of unspoken idea that students will just somehow figure out how to study on their own? Which, let's be honest, isn't really fair, especially for kids who might not have support or academic guidance at home. Plus, we've all been there. The usual struggles. Procrastination kicking in, or just getting totally distracted by phones and everything else. Those aren't small things. They're real roadblocks to actually learning effectively.
Absolutely, they really are. So, okay, let's connect this to the bigger picture then. What would a classroom actually look like if it deliberately taught learning strategies? Imagine, say, lessons focused specifically on setting achievable goals, or mastering mind maps to see the connections between ideas, maybe even dedicated sessions on active reading, how to really engage with the text, not just skim it, or thinking practically how to manage that pre-exam anxiety. Teaching this stuff would be truly life-changing, not just for grades, but, for life beyond school. What we're talking about here is developing what experts call metacognitive skills. Sounds fancy, but it just means thinking about your own thinking. It's about being able to step back and ask yourself, okay, hold on, am I actually learning this properly? Is this study method working for me? It's like becoming your own learning detective or coach.
Yes, and this is where it really connects for me personally. I actually had this brilliant English teacher back in high school, and she really encouraged us to think about how we learned best as individuals. She gave us choices for projects. You could make a video, draw these big concept maps, or give a presentation, whatever worked for you. And that honestly changed everything for me, because suddenly it wasn't just about spitting back information. It was about finding my way to understand it. And then later in university, a professor introduced Cornell note-taking. That was maybe the first time I felt genuinely in control of my learning process, instead of just, passively sitting there while information washed over me. That feeling of shifting from being like a sponge to being, I don't know, an active builder of my own knowledge, that was huge. When students know how to learn, they get that vital sense of control, right? And that naturally makes you feel more confident, more motivated. It really feeds into becoming a self-directed learner, which is just essential for university and honestly for dealing with complex information anywhere in life.
That's such a great example of the impact. Really powerful. So given everything we've discussed, let's throw a few questions out there for you, our listener, to think about. First off, do you think the ability to learn independently, on your own is important for success after you leave school? And why or why not? Also, what do you think are good ways for schools to actually support students who find studying difficult? And one more. In your view, should knowing how to learn, understanding these methods, be part of school assessment, like tested? Or are these skills purely for personal growth? Just mull those over. Your perspective here is really interesting.
So, thinking about the bigger picture, what are the real benefits if we, as a society, really embrace this how-to-learn approach in education? Well, first, pretty obviously, students would likely do better in exams, but maybe more importantly, they'd actually remember what they learned for longer. Second, we'd be cultivating more independent thinkers, people who can tackle problems critically. And third, students would probably feel a lot more prepared for real life, for challenges that aren't just about passing a test. Plus, and this is huge, I think, for anyone who remembers exam stress, this approach could seriously cut down on anxiety. A lot of that stress comes from feeling lost, right? Not knowing how to study effectively. When you have the tools, you feel capable, empowered, not just helpless. It completely changes the whole feeling around learning, from dread to, competence.
Absolutely. Empowerment is a great word for it. Okay, so let's stretch our imaginations a bit for a final thought experiment. If you personally could design a school subject, let's call it Learning Skills 101 or something, what specific topics or techniques would you definitely include in that class? And maybe a follow-up. Do you think a subject like that should be mandatory for all students? Just imagine the potential ripple effect that could have, generation after generation.
Right, so just to kind of wrap up this deep dive, we've really explored how crucial it is to teach students how to learn, not just feed them what to learn. We touched on some really effective methods like active recall, spaced repetition, mind mapping, and we talked about the broader benefits: boosting confidence, encouraging independence, helping with long-term success, and definitely reducing that anxiety factor. It's really about that shift, isn't it? From just receiving facts to becoming someone who truly understands how to acquire and master knowledge.
Exactly. So here's our final, maybe slightly provocative thought for you to take away and chew on. If you could travel back in time right now, what single piece of study advice would you give to your younger self? Really think about that one. What would have made the biggest difference for you? And maybe, share that thought with someone else, a friend, a teacher, a student in your life. Perhaps you'll help someone else unlock that secret of how to really learn. Always remember, it's not just about what you know, it's about how you grow.